Congressman Duncan Hunter joining us now on the Young Turks. Congressman Hunter, how are you?
Hey, good to be with you. How you doing?
Good. You know, I remember your press conference about Guantanamo Bay, and I wanted to ask about that real quick. John McCain thinks it should be shut down. Do you disagree with him?
No, I do disagree with him. In fact, there's only one major prison in the world that's never had a murder.
Mm-hmm.
That's Guantanamo.
They have had a couple of suicides, though.
Well, that's true, but every other major prison in the world has had lots of murders, and Guantanamo has never had a murder. You can have a suicide takes one person. That's the person that does it to himself. But a murder takes some degree of exposure, some degree of malfeasance, or some degree of neglect to allow either a prisoner or a guard to do that. And that's kind of an extraordinary statistic because Guantanamo's been held up by the rest of the world as being a focal point for what is considered by lots of other folks who don't participate in the war against terror to be abusive. So I think it's an important statistic.
Congressman Hunter, that might have to do with the fact that they are kept in prison cells for 23 hours a day. It's hard to murder someone when they're in a cell for 23 hours a day, and a lot of people would consider that inhumane.
I
not consider that inhumane?
In the first place, I've been to Guantanamo and watched the routine. The people that I watched, they have 5 times a day they read the Quran over the loudspeaker to the prisoners. Then they stop everything they're doing, whatever they're doing, and they have quiet time. If you had a Baptist preacher reading over a loudspeaker in an American prison, you'd immediately be sued by the ACLU. So they have that. They have excellent food. In fact, one way we stopped this push to close down Guantanamo was to read the menu: rice pilaf, orange chicken, 2 or 3 types of vegetables is an average meal. They have. I've also been to their HMO, their medical facilities at Guantanamo. They have a better medical facility at Guantanamo and better treatment than what I would consider to be most HMOs in this country. So no, they're not kept in a prison in a single cell 23 hours a day. As we left, they had a major soccer game going on, and the prisoners were playing soccer. So that's what and I don't know where you got this 23 hours a day thing, but
certainly some of the prisoners in Guantanamo have been kept in 23 hours, and the government has admitted that. In fact, detainees like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and some of the other ones that are not as egregious as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed have been waterboarded, have had stress positions. And interestingly, the same manual was used on them as was used on John McCain when he was a POW in North Vietnam. Does that not disturb you at all?
Well, in the first place, if you look at the percentage of people who had that treatment, extremely small. What percent of people do you think have been waterboarded? Less than 1%?
Is it okay to waterboard them
or
no?
I think it depends on the circumstances. The question would be, and I think it was a question Fox Radio or Fox News asked at the first debate in South Carolina, if you had someone who had information on a nuclear event that was going to take place in an American city and kill millions of people, would you get the information by putting stress on them, or would you say we play by Marquis of Queensberry rules, we're going to have to write those people off? That's the real question. So whether or not something is fair or unfair, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had waterboarding, which, as you know, doesn't drown a person. It scares them. It makes them think they're going to be drowned, right?
No, they're actually going through the process of being drowned, and it just gets stopped early.
Well, obviously he wasn't, because he talked, and he's a guy who says that he did indeed plan the event that killed some 3,000 Americans in New York. So it depends on what the circumstances are. And I go back to another case.
Shouldn't America be better than that, though, Congressman Hunter?
No, I think that if you are trying to get information that can save thousands of American lives, then scaring the person. And I'll give you another example. This lieutenant colonel who's running for Congress in Florida as a Republican, Alan West, he's a guy who when he captured an insurgent leader in northern Iraq, asked him where he knew an ambush was being set up for his men. The colonel, the American, did. He asked him where the ambush site was. The insurgent didn't tell him. So he fired off a gun next to his head. Didn't kill him, but scared him. The insurgent then told him where the ambush site was, and he saved his men. Now, if you're an American father and your kid was in that squad, do you think it was worthwhile to scare the insurgent into telling you, or do you think you had a duty under the Marquis of Queensberry rules to let your kid get ambushed? That's the tough side of the question you just asked me. What's your answer?
I do have an answer for that. I believe that we're Americans. We're a shining city on a hill. and I believe that we have a responsibility to the world and to Americans to uphold a better standard. And we followed the Army Field Manual for decades. It's worked for us. We beat the Nazis with it. We beat the Soviets with it. And we could beat Al-Qaeda with it if we believe in the American system.
Okay, but now what's your answer in the specific question? If you have an ambush,
I would not do the same kind of tactics that the North Vietnamese used on John McCain. I would not break the Army Field Manual. And if I did, I would step aside. If I thought it was worth it, and I did it, and I saved those guys under a situation which almost never happens, by the way. And by the way, the North Vietnamese also use that manual not to get proper confessions, but to get false confessions, as they did from John McCain.
Now, when you say it doesn't happen very often, you've hit the nail on the head, because if you go back to Guantanamo, the events that you've talked about are less than 1% of the prisoners. Most of the prisoners. Now, I looked at the medical records. The prisoners averaged a weight gain at Guantanamo between 5 and 7 pounds. They had, again, the best medical care you could possibly get. They had the Koran read to them at taxpayers' expense, and they had taxpayer paid for beads and prayer rugs. You do acknowledge that?
I do.
Well, so here's my question to you. If you have a place which simply has a bad reputation, and I think if you went down to Guantanamo today and took the tour, which thousands of people have taken, you'd probably say, I think it's okay now. Would you still close it down just for cosmetic sake, just because you don't think it looks good?
No,
what's your answer to that?
I will give you an answer to that. Congressman Honor, do you realize that when you go down there, you're a congressman, and they give you a manufactured dog and pony show? And do you realize that today, the same level of torture that was being done, or detainee abuse, or whatever you want to call it, enhanced interrogations, is not being done today, honestly, as it was in 2001, 2, 3, and 4.
Well, let me repeat what a Democrat congressman said. And, the Democrats obviously hammered Guantanamo. When Madeline Bordallo of Guam went down and took her tour, she's a pretty tough lady, and she doesn't take Potemkin tours. She said, and she walked out, she made a statement, she said, this is a country club. It is a very comfortable place right now for people. So my question, and you never did answer, you just asked me one of myself, which is pretty good, a lot of talent there, but my question to you is, would you close down Guantanamo if you found they feed them good, they give them lots of religious deference, and they give them good exercise, and you do have to have them someplace? Would you close it down just because it's got what you consider to be a bad rep? What's your answer to that?
I would close them down, one, because it has been systematic abuse there earlier, and hence has given the our country a terrible reputation, and that is relevant in our fight against terror. Number two, I would mainly close it down because the Supreme Court has ruled that they are outside of the judicial system in America, and they need to get inside that system. We tried Ramzi Youssef, we tried the Blind Sheikh, and they're in a maximum security prison in Colorado. Our American justice system can't handle this, and when I hear that we have to do military tribunals that the Supreme Court has not sanctioned, I feel that you guys don't believe in the American justice system.
No, actually, under the Geneva Convention, Article 3, the system that we put in place, it has not been deemed unconstitutional. The one additional constitutional right that has been given, which I disagree with, was a 5-4 decision, a split with the Supreme Court, was habeas corpus. And habeas corpus was given to the people in Guantanamo precisely because the Supreme Court did not consider it to be outside of the United States. They considered it to be basically a part of the United States. Now, interestingly, they said if it was somewhere else in the world, like Iraq or Pakistan or some other place, they would not give them habeas corpus. And that turned on a case that occurred after World War II in Germany when a German defendant, a Nazi, tried to get a habeas corpus, and they said you can't have it. And I want to reiterate one thing we have under the tribunals, because I helped put that law together. You've got a right to be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. You have a right to a lawyer. You have a right to cross-examination. You have a right to confront your accuser. We even have a system. We said, wait a minute, we don't want to have a jury where you got a colonel who pressures down on a lieutenant and the lieutenant votes guilty. So we said we're going to have a secret ballot with the jury. We did a lot of things to protect those people. In fact, when I had a panel of defense experts who were defending people at Guantanamo, and I asked them, what new rights would you give these people? They didn't come up with a single one. I read them the 30 or so rights that they have that we put into the tribunals. And I'll bet you, maybe I'm wrong, but I'll bet you as you know, they're now prosecuting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others, that those convictions will be upheld. If they're not upheld, it will be a a lack of evidence, but not necessarily a defect in the system.
Congressman Hunter, I believe the American justice system was sufficient for it, and we have a disagreement on that. You think that there needed to be a separate system for it. I understand that. I want to just quickly get an answer on that question of, and this will be the last one. Okay. John McCain was tortured in the Hanoi Hilton, and they used stress positions on him, and they used temperature variation on him. They used, in fact, the same exact Chinese manual to torture him that we have used on our detainees in enhanced interrogations. So should we have done that, given that that was the same thing that John McCain suffered under the North Vietnamese?
Answer. If you really want an answer to that, you ought to see what John McCain said when they said, now, if you had millions of Americans' lives at stake, are you telling us you wouldn't do anything extraordinary to get the answer from them?
So you
now,
would.
I would refer you to his answer. Mm-hmm. His answer, and I don't have the exact quotation because it's been quite a while since he said it. But John McCain didn't in that answer say, no, I would play by Marquis of Queensberry rules. He said, words to the effect, you do what you have to do for your country to survive. And I think that's a good question that any American would say. As I said, it's a matter of degree. But first, the first thing I'd say is this. Nobody, even the wildest left-winger, has not said that with our system viewed as a whole, is anything close to what the North Vietnamese did to people, right? I mean, I've looked at the various instances. For example, when they said, well, they used dogs, they said, did the dog ever bite a person at that location? Well, no, but they barked. Okay. Did they actually ever kill anybody? No, but they scared people.
But Congressman Hunter,
let me just
there was
ask you,
100 murders.
If you talk to
in Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib.
Wait a second. Not a single murder has ever occurred at Guantanamo.
No, combined. In
Iraq
and Afghanistan, Abu Ghraib and Bagram Air Base, 100 investigated by the United States military.
But you will agree that not a single murder has taken place at Guantanamo, right? Now,
that's
Abu
a different
Ghraib
situation. In Abu Ghraib, we
actually Guantanamo is
suffocated someone to death and took a picture with a thumbs up next to it.
Yeah, and you know something? What those military guys did, the men and the women who got together at 1 o'clock in the morning, those cell blocks, what they did with each other. I don't know if you saw the pictures that came out, pretty bad pictures coming out of Abu Ghraib.
But doesn't
that had nothing to do with standard military procedure. What they did together, just counting the prisoners, would have been the subject for military discipline, and indeed was the subject for military discipline.
Doesn't it seem like you're blaming
let's go back to what you're talking about. We're talking about closing Guantanamo. Abu Ghraib is now in the hands of the Iraq government, and Guantanamo is the issue, and there's never been a murder in Guantanamo. And I think you have to consider that when you say, are we going to close that place? There's not a Democrat congressman in this country who can say that he's got a prison where there was never a murder, unless they built it yesterday.
Once again, there were the suicides where they said that they couldn't stand the detention because it was so harsh that they killed themselves. Now, you might not agree with them, but that's why they killed themselves.
Wait a minute. There's only been 1 or 2 suicides at Guantanamo. Okay.
I think the number's at least 2. I honestly don't have the exact number.
But it's not 5, 10, 20. But listen, it's been good talking to you, and let's see what happens with these prosecutions under the new law and see if in fact it holds up. I think it'll.
I'm looking forward to that as well.
Hey, great to be with you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.